All right, hi. Looking at chapters 12 and chapter 14 in the Glickman text for week 7 of EDAS 6250. So, chapter 12, looking at the notions of assessment and planning, assessing and planning, and how we know where our problems are, and then how we look to attack those problems within schools, some different tools and techniques that we can use in that process. And then chapter 14, looking at evaluation, and not just notions of teacher evaluation, but the fact that we need to evaluate programs and all other kinds of elements within our schools as we find ourselves in administrative and supervisory roles. So we've got a fair number of slides, though we'll get through them fairly quickly. And so here we go. So chapter 12. So this is a chart that actually isn't in chapter 12 in the text, but was part of an older version of the Glickman book. And this is one that's an interesting kind of exercise to think about, is how throughout the week, what amount of time we are spending on various tasks. And I know that for myself as a principal, I found myself doing a lot of other things, right? Being at central office for 3/4 of the day at meetings, and then returning phone calls and dealing with paperwork and reporting, and sometimes that faculty and students category might have gotten really small. So these are things to consider as you look at the way in which you are allocating your time and making use of your experiences. So Glickman also talks about the importance of engaging in various activities, and one of those activities could be looking at increasing classroom visits and using a flow chart to understand what the activities that you're trying to do are, what resources are going to be required for, and then how you're going to know whether you accomplished this kind of goal, right? So these ideas of that idea of evaluation as well. So here you see activities. This is scheduling visits and doing those kinds of things, and then the resources. You got your secretary to understand that this is protected time. I have a very good friend that when he was a principal, there were particular times of the day in which were protected, and his secretary knew that unless someone was dead or the building was on fire, not to disturb him during those times. In one school that he worked at, that was his morning time, kind of morning hall supervision. He was in the same place every day, greeting kids, talking with kids, but also supervising. But it was a space that kids in his building knew where he was going to be. At another school, it was the afternoon bus line, right? He was out there every day, again, supervising and looking, but it was a place where parents, faculty, and students knew that he was going to be, and his secretary knew to protect that time. So here are ways of assessing, and Glickman goes through this list, right? This kind of eyes and ears that we're looking, that we're doing some systematic observations. We're looking at official records, test scores, report cards, discipline referrals, maybe other data that we can pull from the student information systems to help us with that. Review of work products, so if we say this is what outstanding student work looks like, how are we getting through those things? And you go through this list of other possibilities, and they're outlined with brief descriptions in the text, and I thought he did a nice job with those. So when we analyze our organizational needs, there's three pieces that Glickman brings forward. The one is this cause and effect diagram, which in this case is used as a fishbone, right? So the issue that what we want to study is this idea of ineffective professional development program. And through surveying and talking with people, we realize that there are 4 large categories in which are the reasons why we ended up with this problem. And then we have these other kinds of areas, these smaller pieces that are led to this being the pieces. These are the causes, right? So no teacher involvement in the planning process, not needs based. We didn't take the time to figure out whether it was part of what we needed or not. And so all of this goes into the planning piece. This all relates to an effective professional development program, as in this example, right? Needs analysis. This is a partial copy of what was in the text, right? So this was an example of what's happening when a student's sent to the office, and this is sent to this was conducted according to Glickman in the text by the secretary, right? So how's the secretary perceiving what happens when a student's sent to the office for a misbehavior, right? So what did she do? The student was sent to the office. First question is principal in the office? Yes or no? So yes, student has a note. No, student sent back to classroom. Yeah, we would have gone through this process. And maybe the problem is, maybe one of the concerns that we have, and what we realize is that we have students that are being sent back to class after being disruptive, and the principal's like, I didn't even see that kid, or that kid never even made it to my office, or I don't know what you're talking about, and it's the secretary, right, engaged in this practice. So this is an opportunity potentially to help develop the classified staff as well. So this chart, the Pareto chart, right? So this is the idea around dropouts. This is in the text as well. So these are the various reasons why a student might be dropping out, and the various percentages of students that are reporting that. And then this is the cumulative, right? So if we wanted to know, so right around here, 75% of all dropouts, nearly 75% of all dropouts are only in these three categories, right? So that's information that we can gain. Over almost 60% are in these first two categories. So this is a way, again, to organize and look at data in a way that may be helpful to us. So now let's talk about the planning side. And I'm galloping, I know, but we've got a lot to get through still, and I'm already almost halfway through my time. So on the planning side, he again gives us kind of three different tools that we can look at. So the affinity diagram, we could have all of the, this would be like maybe a wall exercise where you give people large note cards and they're writing down ideas, and we're pasting those up, and then we categorize them, right? We're creating categories. These are all related to each other. These are all related to each other. So these are all, we can identify these. These kind of run together as social development ideas. And so this helps, again, in this planning, so we have larger categories. Instead of all these individual cards, that is a lot, now we're down to 5 big ideas that we can attack. And this makes the planning process so much easier when we don't see 100 things to do, but we see 5 things to do. Impact analysis chart. So this is a chart where we revised a curriculum guide, and the question is, who's going to be affected by this? Who or what will be affected by this revised curriculum guide? So we have some people here, teachers and students. We have some things, the reading content as well as instructional practices. And then, in what ways might they be impacted, right, on these outside pieces? So this is, again, a visual that some people may just write these down on a list, but this is a visual diagram that helps us to understand and to think about. And when we're engaged with a group, maybe it's a group of teachers that we're working with, maybe it's our department heads, maybe it's just our own administrative team, maybe it's a district level team. These kinds of tools are handy to start to look at and think about. The Gantt chart is really a timelining chart. I'm most familiar with these. This is almost a standard way in which building construction projects are outlined, so that we know when concrete's coming in, and that as soon as concrete's done, that steel work can begin. But while the steel work's going, we can also be doing this electrical undergrounds and so on and so on. So you get to see and to help coordinate. So this helps coordinate on a calendar who's doing what when and what needs to happen. All right, and then he also talks about force field analysis. And one of the things that's important about force field analysis is that this is a assessing practice as well as a planning practice, right? Because we are identifying where we want to be, right? Desired state. We are identifying where we are currently, our current state. And then we're looking at what's going to help move us towards our desired state, and what will be the things pulling us back towards the current state. And it's right here. So that's the analysis component. And then in the planning component, we start to say, okay, we want to attack this resisting force, or maybe we want to attack these 3 resisting forces. And we're going to attack those, and how are we going to do that? And how do we minimize their impact so that the driving forces can become stronger? And sometimes the planning is that this is a weak resisting force, so we need to be strong on our driving forces and move this over and just force it over. Other times it's about actually focusing here to give the driving force space to expand. Okay, so that's force field analysis. So some cautions. I've got 2 pages of cautions here around the planning process, right? And a couple of these that I want to hit. So the top one, planning is about people. The things that we do inside schools need to be about the people of the school, not the tools. So we're not planning a new policy. We're not planning, creating a new form is not planning. We plan for how, what we want to have happen with teachers and students, and that may result in the production of a new form, but we're not planning to make a new form, right? We need to understand diversity in terms of both groups that are representative and ideas that are considered in the planning process. So, you know, sometimes it's great to have people that are really close to us as part of the planning process, but we also need to have some naysayers in the room as well. Some people that will be natural resistors to help us not only understand where resistance is coming from, but to bring alternative ideas in play. Consideration of alternative futures, right? This is how we think it's going to play out, but we need to think about other elements as well. And here's a few others that we ought to consider and look at. And I'm going to keep on moving with this. So, evaluation skills. So, Wolf has this kind of funny 5 topical methods. You know, it looks good. Oh, I feel that it's good. I talked to some people, so that means it's good. I've looked at the program, not what's actually happening, but just what they're teaching, and that looks good. And then I've added up all the figures, right? So, so key decisions in the program evaluation process. This is not teacher, but program evaluation process. What's the purpose? Who will do it? What questions need to be answered? How will the data be analyzed, right? And when will and how will it be reported? Is it going to go to just administrators? Is it going to be for public consumption? Who all gets to see the full report? Important things. I'm going to keep moving along. They talk about the 5 phases of instructional program evaluation. Oh, I have a blank slide. Oh, I didn't eliminate all these. Sorry. Evaluation for teacher empowerment, right? Program evaluation and teacher empowerment. So here, Fetterman's talking about these ideas that we need to really focus in on how we help teachers start to conduct the program evaluations, take that out of the supervisor's hands and have the people that are using the programs engage with the evaluation. And that's a great concept and idea that we ought to think about. Here's teacher evaluation, and I'm going to pause for just a minute because I'd like you to read these 3 questions, and actually these will be the that last question in this discussion around formative and summative evaluation, I think is one that we'll use for our discussion board this week. So you can look at those. Here's how McGreal is suggesting that we eliminate that. I've got 30 seconds. And here's the notions around self-evaluation. Are we asking teachers to be reflective in their own practice to evaluate themselves? That ends this week's presentation. I hope everyone has a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.